guys, this is part 3 of the vehicle modelling tutorials. So I'm going to go straight in and explain what I'm doing here. So I'm collapsing the unwrap that we did in the last video. And then what we're going to be doing is setting up the symmetry modifier again. So I'm going to assume you've textured yours at this point. I haven't yet on mine, but it doesn't matter because we've unwrapped it. So you pop on the symmetry modifier and make sure it's on the Z axis. If you've modelled it in the same direction as me, that is. And then you'll pop down the menu and go onto mirror and move that mirror into the right position, just like we did on the barrel tutorial. This is the point where you're going to need to make sure that your car is wide enough, or your vehicle even. Mine is, but you might need to make sure that yours is wide enough before you put this on. And then you're going to collapse that back down. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the tyre. I am going to be speeding up part of this video again, so if you do feel like it's moving a bit too fast, you can change it on the YouTube settings and just make it to 0.5 or something, if you do want to watch me do it step by step. So what I've done here is I've turned the grid back on by pressing G, and now we need to make sure that the pivot points are in the right place for when we get into Unity. So at the moment, it looks like the pivot point's actually directly over that wheel arch there, and it's because of where the symmetry modifier was before. So we need to go into the third tab along after hierarchy, and in hierarchy, and we want to press onto effect pivot only, and then center it to object, and then I'm just going to move it along the Y axis to the front of the car, so just underneath the hood at the front, and then I'm going to lower it down to just above the wheel arches. This is a really important step when we get it into Unity, or else the car controller will not work properly, and as it's a physics-based game, we do really need this car to work properly with the controller. So we're just making sure that's in position, and now I'm going to rotate the car 180 degrees, so the back is kind of facing us. And then I'm going to rotate it again so that it's kind of pointing upwards towards the sky. And it looks silly, but this is just due to how when we export it as an FBX, it messes up all of the orientation. So we need to make sure that when we get it into Unity, it sits nice and flat and it works in the same direction as the car controller. So that's why we have to make it look strange like this. So I just flick through all the directions there so that you can copy this directly. It is really important that it's facing the exact same way as mine. And now I'm just going to do the wheel. So I'm going to center that off by clicking right mouse click on those direction X, Y, and Z directions at the bottom. And this is really important, this step. So you need to save now, if you haven't saved before, because we're going to delete the wheel. We are going to go back to the wheel afterwards, but we need to delete it while we export it here. So this next step is incredibly important. I'm just going to go over into that settings tab on the far right, and I'm going to reset the xForm. So as we were editing this mesh, we kind of messed up the xForm a bit, so we're going to reset that so it's nice and happy, and when we take it into Unity it won't be some random skewed shape. So you press reset xForm, it'll add it above the editable poly, and then we just collapse that down and just press yes on the boxes that pop up. So now we're ready to export this into Unity. So there are a couple of things we just have to be careful with when we are exporting this into Unity. So you want to go on File, Export, and then just the top one where it says Export. This is why we deleted the wheel, because we need it. When you export, it exports everything in the scene. So we had to delete the wheel while we exported this. Likewise, when we export the wheel, we will be deleting the car. So save that into your folder, wherever you want to save it to. And then when this box pops up, for some reason, Unity's X, Y, and Z axes are opposite to 3ds Max, so we need to make sure that this up axis is actually set to Y instead of to Z. So in 3ds Max, up is Z, but yeah, just swap those over so that we don't have an upside down car when we get it into Unity. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing with the wheel. I'm going to click on the wheel. I'm going to make sure that it's perfectly set to 0 on all the axes, and I'm going to go on the pivot, and this time we need to move the pivot to just on the far inside side of the wheel. And this is because this is where it's going to turn from when we're turning the car. We don't want it turning from the very centre, because that's just not how wheels turn. They turn from a pivot point here. So just get that sorted. You will need to reset the xForm on this as well. I don't do that in the video because I've already done it. And I cut it out and I forgot to film it, so sorry. And then you just want to go on File and export that the exact same way as we did the car. Okay, so now I'm going to drag the FBX for the vehicle and the FBX for the tyre into the assets folder. And the way that Chris has made this car is he's made a prefab. So we're going to just replace the meshes that he has on the prefab already. So drop down where it says sample scene and then click on the car body prefab. And there's an arrow on the far right, and that'll open up the scene into the prefab scene. So what you can see in here is it's gone all blue, but this car is actually the mesh from the car body on the left over there. So I'm just going to drag and drop our mesh into where it says mesh filter, and it'll replace it. It's far too big for the mesh renderer that's on at the moment, but that's fine. I'm going to drag the mesh as well into the mesh collider so that it takes the shape of our vehicle instead of Chris's vehicle. So the tyres are all in the wrong place as well, and Chris has kindly set up a cylinder collider that fits over the wheels. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're moving the cylinder collider and the wheels at the same time. If you want to import your own wheel, you can just replace the mesh like you did with the car. You'll just have to realign everything. I'm not doing that just for the sake of the video. I have shown you how to import it in though. So now I'm just grabbing the wheel collider and the wheel mesh and moving those into position. I'm making sure I grab the front and the back passenger side at once and the front and the back driver side at once, just so that they stay in the same position on the X and Y axis. But you can just do that by hand later by typing in the same number. It's fine. So I'm just aligning these here. It does take some time, so I'm going to speed up the video here. Just be very careful when you're aligning these that they are not touching the wheel arches of the car. You can scale them bigger like I do now, and that's fine, but you just have to realign them. I just forgot to do that first. You just have to make sure that the wheel itself isn't touching the car, or the wheel will not spin, because there is a mesh collider on the car. So now we've got our wheels in place, we can click onto scene again, and everything should be in the right position. So if we press play, we should be able to drive our vehicle around. And that's how you change the mesh and the tyres.